Welcome to Backwards on Purpose, where I attempt to expose the horrendous record of the federal agency that's rated 432 out of 432. The very same people who are responsible for over 150,000 people at 122 locations. If you're unfamiliar with, with this, I think you'll find it to be a real eye-opener. that make it extremely difficult for people to deal with. And then you have expired food, uncontrolled temperature extremes. They're like either like an oven or you're freezing in there. Something I've just been talking about is poorly trained, belligerent, lazy employees, mentally unstable employees. Folks, that's a lot of people that work there. I mean, either they don't care or their goal is to try and catch you to doing things that you probably in some cases you shouldn't be doing, or finding you with contraband, but they make that their life's work instead of working with the prisoners to help them get through it and come out on the other side in a good place. Unacceptable supervisors. Wardens that were corrections officers that are being promoted to the level of their incompetence. I think they call that the Peter Principle. It goes on and on and on. You go from corrections officer in the rec area to the warden. Without the proper training. Mind-boggling levels of waste, greed, and corruption, all of which the DOJ and Congress is well aware of, but they allow it to continue. Hopefully it'll get better. But it doesn't get better. Nothing changes, and you're not going to change anything until you change the people that are running this thing, and that's more than just the director. She may have the best of intentions, but the layers of bureaucracy underneath her, what some would call the deep state, they've been there for a long time. They're the root cause of the problem or are responsible for continuing the problems. They don't want to fix it. They just want to keep it going. Laws and guidelines are routinely ignored. It's go back to what I spoke about a little bit ago. 50,000 inmates are eligible for early release due to the First Step Act. And yet they routinely ignore it. They disregard it. They act like, well, they haven't been trained in it or aren't aware of it. It's just nonsense. Medical records are falsified routinely, so that people don't find it. Fictional reports are submitted of rehabilitative activities that never take place. You trust me, folks, that can and does happen, and it happens all the time. Legal mail going in and out of the institution is routinely mishandled, misplaced, or discarded without regard to postal regulations. You put it in a drop box thinking that it's going to get to the intended recipient, and sometimes it's important legal questions, legal documents. It may even be something as routine as, sending a letter to family and friends. But these people seem to take delight in thwarting your efforts to send that out. The bottom line is nobody's going to look out for an inmate. So what they need to do is to make sure you tell people to document everything and routinely get copies of your medical records and make sure that they checked as soon as you get them so that they correspond with what really happened, what they really did. It's amazing how things just kind of slip through the cracks, and it's sometimes so ridiculously minimal, that you don't notice, but it's just routine. You ultimately have to ask yourself and others what exactly is wrong with these people. Seriously. How do you do that to other people? It's horrible. It's inhumane. It's almost third world. And these people are so wrapped up in bureaucratic BS that the obvious escapes them. That's where the inmate term backwards on purpose comes from. It's that statement. You just can't make this stuff up. And I think in current times, we're seeing things where attempts are made to cover things up and gloss things over and ignore things. And this is the kind of stuff that happens all the time with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And, I don't know how you make a change except to make people aware of what's going on, how it's going on, what they're doing, how they're doing it. And at the very least, if they're so understaffed and their staff is so burdened and bogged down by a lack of staff and resources, and you've got 50,000 people that are eligible to be released to pre-release custody, which is a halfway house, or home confinement, which is simply an ankle monitor that's placed, and you spend your time at home. It costs a whole lot less to work with halfway houses and to work with home confinement. And if you're eligible for it, the law was created. If you're eligible to make that happen, keeping you there, they can't handle the workload. They don't have the people. They don't, they have crumbling facilities, crumbling infrastructure. I mean, the things that they do, I use the milk story. Somebody orders too much milk and we don't have a place to put it. So what do you do with it? Well, we just dump it. We send it to the dump. To be sure, don't give it to a food bank to somebody who could use it. We'll just take it to the dump. Who thinks like that? That's the expedient thing to do. And that's not the right thing to do. The old saying, from a sage old coach who I won't name because we're, partisan football fans, but he always used to say it's the right thing to do. So what's the right thing to do with a situation like this? Well, first off, it's get as many people back out in the community as you can. And statutorily, the director has an obligation to make sure there's sufficient space to accommodate all eligible prisoners. Well, she's not doing her job. She's not staffing halfway houses and residential reentry centers to handle people going to halfway houses, to handle the people that can be released to home confinement, to reduce the population to the extent that the resources available equal where they should be, so that you have sufficient staffing levels to handle 100,000 prisoners instead of 150,000. You have the manner, method, and means of doing that. And that's simply a question of you have to do that. You have to make sure that you've done your job. There are many, many other ways. The Bureau has a thing called Program Guidelines for Home Confinement. It's a document called 7320.01. Very informative. And there are all kinds of alternatives that you can do to release people to home confinement, especially if they're extremely low risk and you don't have the resources at a halfway house to handle them. You can put them in home confinement and give them different reporting options, different reporting requirements. So there are methods, there are ways, and instead we go, oh, God, woe is me. We don't have any money. We can't do anything. We got too many people. We're too understaffed. Our corrections officers are just overworked, and they're facing all kinds of problems. Reduce the prison population. It's the easy start. And Miss Peters, get off your ass. Get these halfway houses staffed up so they can handle this. And make sure somebody in D.C. is accountable for doing this. Instead of spouting the company line, say, hey, staff these places. Get these people out of here. Reduce the population. Tell Congress, we need to repair these facilities or we're going to lose them. So instead of spending $500,000 or $500 million or $1 billion on a brand new prison, let's fix the ones we have. Let's get the roofs replaced, the mold replaced, the water lines replaced. Get some decent food in there. I remember one day they served these little pies. You can buy them in the store. And they were 3 years out of date. Now, I'm going to assume they'd been in cold storage, and they weren't they weren't moldy or mildewy, but 3 years out of date, and that was a treat, folks. It boggles my mind, the ineptness, the total disregard of human decency, common sense. And just you wonder what's wrong with people. I just and if this is indicative of other government agency, I'm going to tell you folks, we're in trouble, because they couldn't think their way out of a box, out of a paper bag. So that's enough of my ranting for this week. I do so enjoy I do so enjoy going off, but it boggles my mind that week after week, session after session, finding material, finding research, finding sources of information is just not hard. And bringing this to the public's attention, to those of us who've been there, I'm not telling them anything new, but get people to listen to this broadcast. If they don't believe you, have them listen to this for a half an hour once every other week. Maybe we can enlighten them. And someone in a position of authority has to make these people accountable, because this stuff just can't go on, and they make the laws and they beat the hell out of the director, and nothing changes. So you find out that you got $3 billion in unfunded repairs. You got 50,000 people who are eligible to get out on First Step Act or Second Step Act. There's no more CARES Act, which is one of the most successful programs the BOP ever had. But there are ways to move people out, and Ms. Peters, you have a mandate to make sure that there is sufficient capacity for all eligible prisoners. Well, ma'am, you got 50,000 of them, and it's time that things need to happen, so that you don't get people being held in custody due to a lack of staff and resources in halfway houses. That just can't happen. And I know that from firsthand experience, as do many, many others. So with that, I'm going to tell the guys that were there is please remember that those we left behind who have no voice. And it's up to us to help improve their lot in life and shine a light on this absolutely abysmal situation. After all the mental and physical abuse that we all suffered at the hands of the BOP, let's treat each other, our families and friends, with a little CPR. That is, be considerate, be polite, and be respectful. Took me a long time to figure that out, and I'm still struggling with it because they beat you down so bad. So give it a whirl. I want to take the time to thank WBGU 88.1 FM for allowing me the time on their radio station to express my views. It's an amazing opportunity, and I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to do this. I should tell you that should you have any questions or comment, please feel free to contact me at backwards@myyahoo.com. That's backwards@myyahoo.com. And don't be afraid to ask a question or ask me to do a little research into something and put it out in the next broadcast. You can also find me on YouTube at Backwards on Purpose, or you can email me for a link. I got to tell you that my technical inability has caused me to screw up a couple of shows. So hopefully within the next week, I'll have a couple more shows loaded up, and my thanks to the folks here at WBGU for helping me format a memory stick so that I can and get these up on YouTube, and the instructors here that help me do these things. So, I am truly an old man, and I'm technically challenged, but believe me, I'm trying. So, and also let you know, if you're interested in sponsoring my broadcasts or podcasts, shoot me an email. Let me know. This is a unique situation, and as I get the podcast stronger and stronger, and if I get my broadcasts better, and do a little better job of research. I'm hopeful that this program will get better and will continue to shine light on all things with the Bureau of Prisons. So thank you, and I'll see you back in a couple of weeks.